34 years ago, a 17-year-old girl vanished on a sunlit road in Fort Worth, Texas. No witnesses, no goodbye, only a bicycle left half buried in the mud by Lake Benbrook. Police suspected a middle-aged neighbor who often appeared near her workplace, but with no body, insufficient evidence, and the investigation quickly stalled. Yet, for over 3 decades, a young detective never stopped searching, believing something in the old case files was still waiting to be uncovered. Then one day, while reopening an evidence bag sealed since 1985, he discovered a small detail everyone had overlooked, a detail enough to change the entire case and leave the city stunned. Before diving into this strange story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love cases solved after decades of silence, don't forget to subscribe to follow us to the end. Texas sun blazed fiercely, late afternoon light spilling over the low houses on Camp Bowie, where the air was dry and scorched like breathing fire. The hum of cicadas and electric fans blended into the soundtrack of a southern U.S. summer, loud, weary, and seemingly harmless. At 5:30 p.m., the glass doors of Brookshire's Market reflected Rachel Merritt, 17, leaving her shift. White shirt, worn knee jeans, hair tied high, she flashed a familiar polite smile at the security guard before pedaling off the lot. On her handlebars, a cloth bag held a few odds and ends, a pint of vanilla ice cream, a folded receipt, and a birthday card she hadn't sent to a classmate. Rachel turned through quiet streets where neighbors called each other by name, where kids played baseball until the sun went out. At a corner, an old woman watering plants waved as she rode by. Rachel paused briefly at the Chevron gas station, checking her watch and talking to a man in a silver pickup parked by the curb. No one caught what they said. A station worker only recalled the man had graying hair, a deep voice, and Rachel smiled, her hand gripping her bag strap. The silver truck pulled away slowly, and minutes later, Rachel vanished from the small town's familiar scene. As night fell, the Merritt porch light glowed, dinner cooling on the table. The wall clock ticked heavily. At 8:30, Mrs. Merritt stepped onto the porch, staring at the dark road ahead, the road Rachel always took home, sleeves still smelling of soap and her smile lingering after each shift. This time, no sign of her, no sound of a bike crunching gravel. She went inside, called around, got no answers. The landline rang and stopped, leaving only the wind whistling through the trees and a faint smell of gasoline in the humid air. When the clock hit 9, she grabbed the phone, hands shaking, and dialed Fort Worth police. "My daughter hasn't come home," she said, voice breaking between rapid breaths. On the other end, the duty officer took notes coldly, like any routine call, unaware that this call would spark one of the city's strangest missing persons cases, a story beginning on a seemingly peaceful afternoon. Fort Worth police received the call at 9:12 p.m. The initial report was brief. Female teen 17, not home after work, suspected missing. Sergeant Dale Strickland, 42, who'd handled dozens of runaway teen cases, thought it was another. But when he called Brookshire's Market and confirmed Rachel Merritt left her shift on time, unseen since, Strickland formed a rapid response team. He and 2 younger officers, Carson and Reed, left the station with flashlights, a camera, and a map of the Camp Bowie neighborhood. At the Merritt home, patrol car lights flickered. The mother, face pale, stood at the door, still clutching the phone like she couldn't let go. Strickland asked gently, "Does she have a boyfriend? Does she go far? Ever run away?" Familiar questions, but Mrs. Merritt's eyes silenced him after seconds. "She's never gone anywhere without calling me." Her voice trembled. From the Merritt house, they retraced Rachel's usual bike route. Yellow streetlights cast a dim glow on slick asphalt, dry grass rustling in the night breeze. 2 blocks from the market, Strickland stopped. Under a street lamp by the Chevron station, his flashlight swept over oil-stained ground. "Here it is," he said softly. Nearby, bike tire tracks left 2 faint lines, then stopped abruptly, overlapped by larger tire marks, clearly from a pickup. A few steps away, Carson found a man's large shoe print shallow in the dust, heading toward the main road. Strickland ordered the area marked, circled in white chalk, noting time and location. A small nylon bag was opened. Carson collected soil samples, sealed and labeled them. They took photos, sketched the scene with a metal ruler and marker. But the patrol car's weak light made work tough. When Strickland swept his flashlight one last time, he missed a second shoe print, half hidden by the pole's shadow, a detail that later sent the case in a new direction. "Forget it, we'll come back in the morning. It'll be clearer," he said, closing his notebook. That night, the report summed up tire tracks, shoe print, oil stains near gas station. The next morning, the team returned. A gas station worker, Gary Mullins, 28, said he saw Rachel talking to a man in a silver pickup the previous evening. He was about 50, graying hair, light blue shirt, old but clean truck. They talked briefly, then she left.
"I didn't see where."
Mullins spoke confidently, yet cautiously, like he feared misremembering. He added the man bought gas around 6:30, paid cash. Strickland noted, tapping his pen, "Cash, no card, hard to trace." The station had a camera, but its tape was erased per a 48-hour overwrite rule. They salvaged one blurry frame, a girl cycling pickup headlights reflecting off glass, then gone. Strickland stared at the black and white photo in a temporary interrogation room, sweat soaking his shirt. He knew when a girl's last image looked like this, the case wouldn't be easy. That noon, Carson brought a list of silver pickups registered around Camp Bowie. Over 40, mostly owned by laborers, mechanics, drivers, some by transport companies. Strickland crossed off names with clear alibis. Then he paused at one. Harold Givens, 48, lived 3 blocks from the Merritts, former electrical engineer, early retired. Registered a 1983 Ford F-150, silver, plate matching the witness's description. "He live alone?" Strickland asked. "Yeah, wife died 4 years ago, no kids," Carson replied. "Neighbors say he's friendly, often fixes plumbing or wiring around." Strickland nodded, eyeing the blurry photo again. "Tonight, we talked to him," he said. Then to Mullins, "Anything else?" His voice, gestures, "Anything odd?" Mullins paused, then whispered, "He asked me what time the station closed and if there were outside cameras." Strickland looked up, eyes briefly cold. He added a line to his notebook, capped his pen, "Suspicious." That afternoon, the team revisited the Merritt home for more details. Rachel's room was untouched, bed neatly made, alarm clock by a photo of her with friends, a wall calendar marking an upcoming birthday. No signs she planned to leave. Strickland stood quietly, eyes lingering on her desk, where an open notebook held slanted handwriting. "Tomorrow, stop by Lake Benbrook, watch the sunset." He slipped the notebook into the case file, stepped onto the porch, and stared at the silent road stretching ahead. That night, at the station, he pinned Rachel's photo to the caseboard, under red text. "Last seen, Camp Bowie, Chevron Station, 6:35 p.m. below," was the first suspect list, in black ink, Harold Givens. The next noon, Strickland and Carson drove to Harold Givens' house on Waverly, 3 blocks from the Merritts. The small house was tidy, lawn trimmed, a faded American flag on the porch, windows half open. When Strickland knocked, a man in his 50s answered, tall, graying hair combed back, light blue shirt neatly ironed. "Hello, Mr. Givens, we're from Fort Worth PD. Strickland showed his badge. "We'd like to ask about a girl, Rachel Merritt, missing since last night." Givens frowned briefly, then smiled politely. "Oh, that girl down the street? I know her. Poor thing, but I can't help much. I was at Baptist Church from 6 to nearly 9 last night. You can ask Pastor Willard or the choir folks." His voice was deep, steady, no hint of evasion. Strickland glanced around the yard, the silver Ford F-150 parked by the fence, unusually shiny, like it had been thoroughly washed. He noted it, asking, "Did you use your truck last night?" Givens shook his head. "No, I walked. Church is 15 minutes away. I don't like driving at night." He spoke slowly, eyes direct. Carson jotted down the statement, glancing at the truck bed. Water droplets still dripped onto the concrete. "Can we check your truck? Just routine?" Strickland asked. Givens shrugged. Go ahead, I've got nothing to hide. They circled the truck, took photos, saw no suspicious scratches or mud. The tires looked new, pressure even, but a small black paint smudge remained on the rear bumper. Strickland collected it, sealed it in a nylon bag, labeled with the time. Back on the porch, Givens stood, hands in pockets, calm to the point of coldness. I heard about her on the radio this morning, he said. I hope you find her soon. Strickland nodded, thanked him, and left, but something felt off. That afternoon, he and Carson visited the Baptist church on Trail Lake. Pastor Willard confirmed, Harold was here last night. He arrived before service, sang in the choir, left after we finished around 9. A choir woman also saw Givens, but couldn't recall if he left mid-service. Strickland took notes, closed his book. Maybe he was there, Carson said quietly, as they left. Strickland didn't reply, just stared out the car window, Texas sunset reflecting red like fire in the side mirror. That evening, the first investigation report was finalized. Givens was noted, alibi confirmed, no direct suspicion. The case file paused on interviews. Meanwhile, a brief local news segment aired, Fort Worth teen missing, whereabouts unknown. Police seek witnesses. Everything seemed on track, until a woman, Martha Caraway, living across from the church, called the hotline. Her voice was urgent. Last night, I saw Givens' silver pickup driving away from the church, around 7:30. I'm sure because the headlights shone right into my window. He was alone. The duty officer recorded the statement and passed it to the investigation unit. Strickland received the report the next morning. He read carefully, underlining 7:30 p.m., opposite direction from church, then sighed. No verified evidence, can't confront based on just a description. He folded the file, placed it in the pending drawer. Carson asked, should we question him again? Strickland shook his head. No rush. If he's involved, we'll see him again soon. Meanwhile, the forensics team sent preliminary results. The black paint on the F-150's rear bumper didn't match anything at the scene, possibly from a road or common obstacle. The oil stain near the gas station was identified as common motor oil, too generic to trace. A dry forensic report, ending all initial hopes. Days passed, no new leads. Martha Caraway's statement was filed under unverified. A small line, but years later, it became the most crucial evidence everyone had overlooked. That weekend, Strickland returned to the scene. The Chevron station was now quiet, neon lights flickering, old oil stains swirling faintly. He stood still, map in hand, thinking of Givens' claim, I walked to church. His house to the church was less than 2 kilometers, but the route passed the exact turn where Rachel vanished. If he walked, why did someone see his truck on this road? Strickland muttered. Carson asked, you suspect him? I suspect we're missing something. That night, Strickland couldn't sleep. He sat in his office, staring at Rachel's photo on the board. She smiled, eyes gazing somewhere distant. Below the photo, a single red ink note, Harold Givens, alibi unverified. Underneath, he added in small letters, like a reminder to himself, don't trust the calm of someone too perfect. 3 days after Rachel Merritt's disappearance, Fort Worth hit the hottest June spell. Heat blanketed Lake Benbrook, rising in misty waves like smoke. Sergeant Strickland stood on the shore, hands on hips, watching small rescue boats sweep the water with outdated sonar. Since early morning, over 40 volunteers and police had split into groups, searching around the lake, along reed banks, and dirt paths into the woods. They brought dogs, binoculars, cameras, even metal detectors. On the shore, locals stood silently, staring at the murky water. A young officer ran up. Sergeant, someone reported finding a bicycle-like object south of the lake. Strickland jumped into a jeep, driving to the site. The area was a shallow lake branch, muddy, thick with reeds, rarely visited. When he arrived, 2 rescuers were bent over the water's edge, pulling out a metal frame coated in brown mud. Sunlight glinted off it, a green bicycle, half buried, front wheel slightly bent, chain caked with sand. Strickland knelt, examining it. A cloth bag still hung from the handlebars, straps tied tightly as when first secured. "Don't touch it," he said, voice low. Carson handed him gloves, and they inspected every detail. No blood, no signs of heavy impact. On the saddle, under sunlight, something tiny sparkled, a long light brown hair. Strickland leaned close, used tweezers to lift it, placed it in a small glass tube, and sealed it carefully. "Get this to the lab now," he said firmly. The cloth bag still held its contents, a melted vanilla ice cream carton, and an unsent birthday card. Strickland opened his notebook, writing, "No signs of robbery, no evidence she planned to leave town." He flipped to the next page, adding, "Bicycle found 6.2 miles southwest of Merritt home, near Lake Benbrook shore." The forensic team arrived, cordoning off the area with yellow tape, photographing every angle. A technician measured the distance from the water's edge to the bicycle, 12 feet. Faint tire tracks marked the wet soil, but no clear footprints. Only a slight drag mark from the trail to the lake, stopping where the bike was half stuck in mud. Someone might have thrown it to hide it, Strickland noted. Carson nodded. Or made it look like an accident. As afternoon faded, wind carried salty water and the stench of mud. Strickland stepped onto the shore, gazing at the still lake. Sonar reported no large objects underwater, but he didn't believe it. He ordered the search extended a mile west, where the forest thickened. Amid trees, insect hums mixed with boat engines, creating an eerie, heavy sound. By sunset, no new clues emerged. Back at the station, Strickland spread out the photos. Cold fluorescent light illuminated the old bicycle, mud crusted around its wheels, the hair glinting like silk. He knew what they held might be the only piece. "Seal all evidence. Temporary code. Bag B27, he ordered. The technician noted the date, time, collector's signature, and placed it in an aluminum box with a police seal. When everyone left, Strickland stayed, staring at Rachel's wall photo. The girl smiled, eyes bright and innocent. He closed his eyes, picturing her cycling through sunlit streets, then gone. Now, only the bike remained, silent, lifeless, like a mute witness to something that happened too fast for anyone to notice. The next morning, he returned to the lake, walking the shore again. Early wind brought a chill, the water rippling under a gray sky. Underfoot, dry leaves stuck to mud, fresh tire tracks, maybe from rescuers, maybe not. He noted, possible suspect returned to check the scene. As he left, Strickland glanced back one last time. He had an odd feeling Lake Benbrook knew more than it revealed. The way its surface lay flat like glass, ripple-free, made him sense it hid something. That evening, in the summary report to the department, the final scene note had 5 words. Bag B27, secured evidence. No one suspected those words would become all that remained of Rachel Merritt's disappearance. A small evidence bag, lying dormant in Fort Worth Police's cold storage for 34 years, waiting for someone patient enough to reopen it and hear the rest of the story. On the 3rd morning after Rachel's disappearance, Strickland had just set his coffee down when the duty phone rang loudly in the station hallway. A young officer stood abruptly, face paling, as he listened. He covered the receiver, turning to Strickland. "Someone called 911, says Rachel Merritt is alive." Strickland grabbed the phone. On the other end, a man's raspy voice, breathing heavily, mixed with static like from a public payphone. "The girl, she's fine. Stop looking. You're wasting time." The voice trembled, repeating the last sentence 3 times before hanging up. Strickland asked urgently, "Who are you? Where is she?" But only a long beep answered. He checked his watch. 9:41 a.m. Police traced the call through Southwestern Bell. It came from a payphone at Waverly and 8th Avenue, less than 2 blocks from Harold Gibbons's house. When they arrived, the booth was still warm, the receiver dangling, cigarette smoke lingering. No one nearby saw the caller. Carson noted, photographed, and collected fingerprints from the lever and receiver. The lab sent results that afternoon, 2 clear prints, one from a booth maintenance worker, one unidentified. Strickland sat quietly, replaying the call's tape. He listened repeatedly. The man's voice seemed to mask its true tone by rasping, but for a brief moment, saying the girl, it cleared, heavy with a North Texas drawl. He wrote in his notebook, likely local, comparing it to Harold Gibbons's statement from days earlier. Strickland noticed similarities, the same drawl on time, the same broken breathing rhythm. He immediately visited Gibbons again. The man opened the door, feigning surprise. "You're back? We're verifying a 911 call this morning, possibly tied to Rachel Merritt's case. A payphone near your house. Did you see anyone using it?" Gibbons raised an eyebrow. "No, I went out at 8:30, bought a paper, then read it home till noon. Didn't hear anything." Strickland glanced around, noting a gray dust streak, like cigarette ash, on Gibbons's sleeve. "Do you smoke?" "Sometimes." "Why?" "Nothing." Strickland nodded, thanked him, but as he left, he glanced at the silver pickup in the yard. Sunlight glared off the hood, forcing him to squint. The call's tape was copied and filed. Strickland requested a copy be sent to the state's audio analysis unit. 12 days later, when he checked the archive for the tape, the black plastic case was gone. The archive officer said, "Probably moved to the county office for temporary storage," but there was no receipt. The second copy was also missing from the digital file. Someone had overwritten it. Strickland filed an internal report, but no investigation followed, probably just a clerical error. His superior said, "Don't make a big deal. We've got nothing but an anonymous call." That night, Strickland stayed late at the station. He played the call on his personal recorder, having copied it the first day. The voice echoed in the dark room. "The girl's alive. Stop looking." The final sentence cut off, as if the man meant to say more but changed his mind. Strickland rewound the end, raising the volume. A truck passed, a dog barked distantly, and a faint sound like metal hitting the booth's glass. He noted, possibly keys or a lighter. The next day, he had the area around the booth checked, hoping to find a lighter or dropped item, but only found an empty Camel cigarette pack and a Baptist church flyer. Strickland held the flyer, reading the faint print, "Sunday worship, 6 p.m. He slipped it into his pocket, silent. News of the call leaked the next day. The local paper headlined, "Stranger claims missing teen alive, police unconfirmed." Some neighbors believed Rachel ran off with a boyfriend, others feared she was kidnapped. The call a taunt from the culprit. To Strickland, it felt like an invisible hand steering the case elsewhere. A week passed without more calls. All leads stalled. The lab couldn't identify the booth's unknown fingerprint. No witnesses saw anyone there that morning. The internal report stated simply, "No new lead case remains open." Finally, superiors ordered Strickland to prioritize another case. The Merritt file was shelved, labeled Missing Person 85-174, with a cold note, "Insufficient criminal evidence." He looked at Rachel's photo on the board, its taped edges frayed. All efforts seemed to end where they began. A payphone blocks from the suspect's house, a raspy voice in static, and a lost tape no one pursued. July ended in silence. Strickland left the office late, Rachel's file still on his desk. He stood in the parking lot, looking west, where Fort Worth's lights faded into darkness. That raspy voice echoed in his mind, broken, distorted, as if from an immeasurable distance. "The girl's alive, stop looking." That was the first night Strickland realized this missing persons case wouldn't close soon, but the city was starting to forget. In August 1985, after nearly 6 weeks of fruitless searching, the Fort Worth Police Department officially downgraded Rachel Merritt's case from suspected abduction to possible runaway. The summary report, barely 10 pages, noted no clear evidence of violence, no witnesses seeing her forced to leave. The file's conclusion was chillingly brief, "No criminal activity determined." Sergeant Strickland read the final summary, fingers tapping slowly on the desk, eyes fixed on possible runaway, as if the words themselves buried everything. He argued Rachel had no reason to vanish, that the traces around Lake Benbrook suggested interference, but his superiors shook their heads. "No body, no evidence of assault. We can't keep chasing a vague missing persons case." One sweltering afternoon, Strickland and Carson packed up the evidence. The green bicycle, cleaned of mud, was placed in a wooden crate labeled Evidence Box 27, containing a small bag with a hair, a red fabric scrap, and the scene collection report. All were sealed, signed, and sent to the department's basement storage, a sealed room smelling of damp and rusted iron. Strickland personally wrote on the label, "Bag B27, Merit Case." He didn't know those words would outlast the investigation itself. After the case was shelved, the press stopped reporting. Rachel's posters on lampposts faded under sun and rain, replaced by yard sale flyers. In Fort Worth, whispers spread that the young girl had run off with a boyfriend or started a new life elsewhere. The Merritt family kept their old house, the porch light glowing each night, but no one called to check in. Only Strickland occasionally stopped by, standing silently at their door, offering hollow comforts he knew helped little. "We're still monitoring the case," he said, though he knew no one was. 4 years later, summer 1989, the Fort Worth Police Department moved all old files to a new storage facility on Hemp Hill Road. Thousands of evidence boxes were loaded onto trucks, renumbered. During the process, the chain of custody log for the Merritt case went missing. When inventoried, no one could find the original record detailing who sealed or opened the evidence and when. Bag B27 remained, but related documents were gone. A clerk scribbled on the file's margin, "Documentation incomplete, transfer continued." That was it. No internal inquiry, no reprimands. Strickland, now reassigned to another unit, heard the news from a colleague. He sighed, "A single hair can't make a case." Weeks later, he applied for early retirement. On his old desk, Rachel's photo remained, edges curled, pinned by a rusted clip. The 1990s passed, like gathering dust. Fort Worth grew, new highways and neighborhoods, sprouting where Lake Benbrook's wild shores once stood. No one mentioned the girl who vanished in 1985. In storage, Bag B27 sat silently in the bottom corner of an iron rack, its label fading, Strickland's signature blurring over time. No one reopened it. No one checked. During inventories, it was merely marked retained, inactive case. 2 decades later, as the city transformed, those involved in the Merritt case had left the force. Carson moved to private insurance. The police chief from that era died of heart disease. Strickland, retired in East Texas, lived quietly in a wooden house by a river. Occasionally, he clipped articles on missing persons cases, storing them neatly in a tin box. Once, he told an old friend, "I never believed Rachel ran away, I just had nothing to prove it." In the official file, the Merritt case's last entry stopped in 1985, with no further notes. It was listed as cold, inactive, unsolved. No one knew that among thousands of dormant evidence items, a small bag labeled B27 held a hair fine as silk, a crumpled red fabric scrap, and the only remaining trace of a girl who vanished in Fort Worth's blazing afternoon sun. For over 30 years, no one touched it. 16 years after Rachel Merritt disappeared, Fort Worth had changed, and with it, the collective memory of the 17-year-old faded like old paint on a wall. But in early spring 2001, less than 30 miles away in Arlington, another disappearance stunned those who'd worked investigations back then, because every detail seemed to repeat. The new victim was Lisa Donnelly, 19, a freshman at Tarrant County College. On March 12, she left class early, texting her boyfriend she'd stop by a store before heading home. She left the lot around 5 p.m., driving an old sedan down Bowen Avenue, the last time anyone saw her. By midnight, her car was found on a side road to Arlington Reservoir, headlights on, driver's door ajar, purse and phone untouched on the front seat. No signs of a struggle, no blood, but at the rear, forensics found a silver paint streak on the bumper's edge, small scratched, as if grazed by another vehicle's front. The paint sample went to the state lab in Austin. Analysis confirmed the compound contained aluminum oxide and magnesium, unique to 1983-1985 Ford F-150s. The result prompted investigators to pull a list of matching vehicles registered locally. One name stood out: Harold Givens, Old Fort Worth address, once owned a silver Ford F-150, plate 7KL-042. Per DMV records, Givens sold the truck in 1994 to a Robert Ingram in Lubbock, but when investigators contacted Lubbock's DMV, No such registration existed. The address on the sale documents was an empty lot. The records inspector said curtly, "Could be a fake transaction to deregister it." When relayed to Arlington, the case lieutenant noted in an internal memo, "Contact potential suspect, Harold Eugene Givens, Fort Worth." One late March afternoon, two Arlington officers knocked on the small house on Waverly, where Givens still lived alone. Givens, now in his 60s, answered calmly as ever. "I sold that truck long ago, don't have it anymore," he said, voice light like recounting an old tale. Buyer was from Lubbock, don't recall the name, probably some classic car collector. He claimed he hadn't been to Arlington in years. They recorded his statement, left politely, with no grounds to detain him. After they left, Givens stood by the door, staring at the quiet street. In the yard, an old Ford decal on the garage wall peeled at the edges, glinting faintly like silver in the light. In the Arlington Police Summary Report, Givens' name appeared 3 times, once in the vehicle match description, once in the interview list, and finally in a cold conclusion, insufficient basis for criminal investigation. No search warrant, no surveillance. They shifted focus to another man, previously convicted of harassment, living near the lake, but DNA from Lisa's car seat didn't match him, and the case stalled. Meanwhile, the silver paint from the scene was logged into the Texas Forensic Data Index. A technician added a small note, "High chemical similarity to sample from Merritt case, Fort Worth, 1985. But since the Merritt file was inactive, the result wasn't forwarded. No one in Arlington knew that paint fleck, a tiny silver speck, was the only link between two disappearances, 16 years apart. In the old house on Waverly, Harold Givens lived quietly, fixing neighbors' appliances, attending church every Sunday. Everyone called him kind, helpful, rarely out at night. When a local reporter asked about Lisa Donnelly, he shook his head. "I heard the news, just awful, but Arlington's an hour's drive, I don't even know where that lake is." His quote ran in the paper on April 22, 2001, with a photo of him at his gate, smiling faintly in the sun, the silver F-150 shadow glinting on a window behind him, unnoticed. For 18 months, the Lisa Donnelly case saw no progress. The investigation team's budget was cut, prioritizing cases with confirmed victims. The file was shelved as a cold case, pending leads, tucked among hundreds of other missing persons files. Strickland, now retired, read about the Arlington student in the Star-Telegram. Seeing paint chips, Ford F-150 silver, he froze. He folded the paper, set it on the table, eyes distant. "No way," he whispered to himself. But no one heard. And like before, Harold Givens calmly sidestepped suspicion, leaving no mark in the police records. The Arlington case cooled, just like Fort Worth in 1985, only this time, no one recalled Rachel Merritt to see how eerily the stories aligned. 33 years later, in fall 2018, the Tarrant County cold case storage, deep in the old police building's basement, still carried the distinct smell of metal and rotting paper. Hundreds of file boxes stacked high, red ink numbers faded, some labels tilting, some cardboard torn at the tape. Under dim yellow fluorescent lights, Detective Evan Torres, 37, newly transferred from the Special Investigations Unit, sifted through files for a case review program. Known for patience and meticulousness, he loved digging into details others overlooked. When a list of 50 missing, no criminal conclusion cases printed out, he paused at line 14, Rachel Merritt, Fort Worth 1985, inactive. A small note read, Bag B27, retained evidence. Torres, raised in Fort Worth, had heard his father mention the girl who vanished with her bike by Lake Benbrook. Curious, he found the Merritt file, barely an inch thick, with faded black and white photos and old reports. But at the last page, something stood out. The evidence log bore Strickland's signature, but no chain of custody after 1989, a gap meaning the evidence hadn't been retested in over 3 decades. He looked at the archive manager. "Is this box still here?" The man shrugged. "If it is, probably in row C, bottom shelf. No one's touched that stuff in decades." Torres walked the narrow hallway, his shoes echoing on concrete. At the end, he found an old metal box, dented, with a faint label, Merit, 1985. Opening it, dust swirled. Inside was a sealed nylon bag, its right corner faintly marked with handwritten text, Bag B27. It held a brown hair, in a glass tube, a red fabric scrap, and a handwritten scene report by Strickland. Torres stood still for a long moment. He knew he held a piece of Fort Worth's forgotten past. He brought the evidence to Tarrant County's forensic lab. Veteran technician Dr. Lang frowned. "What do you plan to do with this? DNA from 1985 is usually degraded." Torres replied, "We have new tech now. I want to try forensic genealogy, like the California Golden State Killer case." Lang smirked. Tech that didn't even have a name in 1985, but he carefully opened the tube, extracted the hair under cold light, and placed it in a tray for next-gen DNA analysis. 2 weeks later, the Austin lab sent results. The DNA was viable for extended whole genome sequencing. Torres's heart raced reading the first line, "Analysis results viable for genealogical database comparison." He immediately requested a GED match query, the voluntary database for familial investigations. 3 days later, the screen showed results: 5 partial matches, distant relatives, second cousins or further. One name stopped him, Sean Givens, born 1980, residing in Denton, Texas. A chill ran down Torres's spine. He recalled that name, seen in the 2001 Arlington file, a grandson of a man named Harold Givens. Torres sat still before the screen, eyes locked on the dense genetic data, impersonal strings of letters and numbers, holding secrets buried for over 30 years. He printed the kinship map the software generated from Sean to his parents, then branching to distant Fort Worth relatives. At the center, the system circled a name in red, Harold Eugene Givens, born 1938, Fort Worth. Next to it, an automated note, relation likelihood, 99.72% paternal line match. He leaned back in his chair, breathing slowly, feeling time reverse. The man once a suspect, then cleared in the Merit case, was back, not through statements or witnesses, but through genetics. Something no one could hide or erase. Torres called the cold case unit head, Lieutenant Valerie Chen, presenting all findings. "If this holds, it's the first breakthrough since 1985. Chen paused, then asked, "You sure about legality? Using civilian GED match data could spark debate." Torres replied curtly, "It's cracked 14 murders in California. If there's a chance to give a forgotten girl her name back, I'm doing it." They sent an official verification request to Austin. On September 17, 2018, the final report arrived. Red stamped, full genetic match between hair sample Rachel Merritt, 1985, and Harold Eugene Givens family line. Not just a familial match, but a rare Y chromosome segment, unique to males in that lineage. Torres held the report, feeling both exhilarated and heavy. He stared at the bolded Givens, a name dormant in files for decades, now alive, echoing from the past. He printed a copy, placing it beside Rachel's old photo from Strickland, a young girl smiling in her Brookshire's market uniform, eyes bright, unaware her life was about to vanish. That evening, Torres returned to the archive. He opened the cabinet, seeing bag B27, still perfectly sealed. Yellow light illuminated Strickland's faded handwriting, and he thought, if not for that old detective's care, if this evidence had been lost among countless files, no one would remember who Rachel was. He whispered to himself, 33 years, and you finally get to speak. As Torres left the archive, the building clock read 11:27 p.m. In the quiet, the iron door's clang echoed down the long hallway. In the cabinet's corner, envelope B27 remained, its seal glinting faintly, like awaiting its story's unveiling, after 3 decades asleep. A week after the Austin report, Torres sat before the cold case unit computer, GED matches green glow reflecting on his face. Data rows scrolled, matching gene sequences, genetic segments, probability figures. On the screen's right, software built a modern pedigree chart, gray branches darkening by kinship closeness. At the center, Sean Givens stood out with a 25.3% match, typical for a grandparent-grandchild link. Torres leaned in, eyes fixed on a note, strong paternal link to Harold Eugene Givens, D.O.B. March 11, 1938, Fort Worth, Texas. He called Dr. Ellen Radner, a geneticist who'd aided genealogy-based cases in California. Ellen arrived with her laptop, opening her family tree builder software. She explained, "From Sean's DNA, we can map the Givens lineage back 3 generations. The key is finding who lived in Fort Worth in the 1980s. Torres nodded, flipping through yellowed photocopies. He pointed to the 1985 resident list. Harold Eugene Givens, electrical engineer, retired, wife died 1981, lived on Waverly. Ellen typed, and the software highlighted Harold's branch in red, noting a 99.72% genetic match probability. "There it is," she said, voice low. "The tree shows Harold as the only intersection for samples matching the victim. If that hair truly came from the perpetrator, Harold's the only one who could pass these markers to current descendants." Torres said nothing, staring at the screen. Connected circles, web-like threads, strong enough to pull a man from the past into light. He left the office, stepping into the hallway. Through the glass, October Texas sun streamed in, dust sparkling in the air. 33 years since Rachel vanished. The man once cleared as a suspect was now nearly 70, living comfortably in the neighborhood where he was once called the kind neighbor. Torres checked the latest citizen data. Harold Givens, 68, still at the old Waverly address, Fort Worth. Additional note, teaches Bible study at Baptist Church near Lake Benbrook, longtime community member, no criminal record. He reread the file, lips tightening. Givens was still there, never left, never changed his name, never hid, as if he believed time could bury everything. That afternoon, Torres drove to the neighborhood. Waverly was still shaded by oaks, peaceful as in Strickland's 1985 photos. Givens' house, repainted beige, had a pristine white fence, manicured lawn, nothing amiss. On the porch, a silver-haired man with glasses swept leaves. Torres killed the engine, watching from the car. Givens moved slowly, each gesture calculated, holding the broom, bending, then pausing to stare toward the distant lake, as if listening. Torres activated his recorder, adjusting the lens. "Nothing suspicious," he said softly, "just a calm old man." But he knew that calm could be ash over old embers. He noted, Givens still resides at original address, no evasive behavior, maintains religious routines, community involvement. 3 days later, he and Ellen finalized the report for Lieutenant Chen. In the small meeting room, the pedigree chart glowed on a large screen, red and green branches weaving like a maze. Ellen pointed to the main branch. "The B27 hair carries rare haplogroup, I2A markers, found only in Harold Givens's paternal line. From there, GED match traced back to grandson Sean Givens, merging with civilian data. No other individual in Fort Worth carries this combination." Chen leaned on the table, silent for seconds, then asked, "Are we certain?" Torres replied slowly, "As certain as the sun rising in the east. Miss Merritt has no voice, but DNA doesn't lie." The decision came that night. Reopen Merritt case, 85-174 for official investigation. Torres was assigned lead investigator, signing the re-examination order. His bold black ink covered the old inactive note, erasing 33 years of silence. Late that night, Torres reviewed the 1985 911 call tape alone, Strickland's grainy personal copy. The raspy voice echoed, "The girl's alive. Stop looking." Torres slowed the middle, ear close to the speaker. In the background, a faint metal clink, a lighter or keys, then the heavy voice, dragging the last word, "Stop looking." More. The drawl on more, long lightly stressed, matched perfectly with Givens's Fort Worth accent during Bible readings. Torres noted, voice pattern consistent with Givens. The next day, he attended Sunday service at the Baptist Church near Lake Benbrook, sitting in the back row. Harold Givens stood at the pulpit, reading scripture in a slow, clear voice, each syllable stretched like a hymn. The congregation listened intently. Torres observed closely, noting face, gestures, voice, all matched the 1985 file, graying hair, deep voice, light blue shirt, 33 years, nothing changed, except this time, Gibbons's gaze from the pulpit met the eyes of the man investigating him. As the service ended, Torres stepped onto the porch, breathing the hot lake breeze. In his mind, pieces aligned, the hair, red fabric, silver paint, now the genetic link. Every path led to one man. Harold Eugene Gibbons, 68, Fort Worth resident, the kind neighbor of old. That night, he opened Strickland's old report, flipping to the last page. In the right corner, faded handwriting. Don't trust the calm of someone too perfect. Torres smiled, whispering, "You were right, Sergeant." He closed the file, knowing the moment of confrontation was near, and this time, the past wouldn't sleep another day. Torres spent nearly a week preparing the surveillance warrant application, meticulously compiling evidence, DNA genealogy results, pedigree charts, the 1985 merit file copy, and the restored voice analysis. The warrant was approved faster than expected. The Tarrant County Sheriff said only, 30 years is long enough for silence. See what he's hiding. 3 days later, Torres and surveillance tech Lance Owens deployed equipment. A gray SUV parked 2 blocks from Harold Gibbons's house held long-range cameras and a tracking antenna. 2 smaller cameras were disguised in a utility box near the wooden fence, and a street lamp across the house. A tiny GPS device was attached under the chassis of Gibbons's silver Ford F-150, now old but functional. Torres monitored from a screen, Gibbons's movements appearing as a red dot on a map. The first week showed nothing unusual. He shopped, went to church, visited a repair shop, and watched TV alone at night. The second week, cameras caught an odd habit. Every Thursday around 6 p.m., Gibbons drove toward Lake Benbrook, where Rachel's bike was found. He parked in an empty lot, turned off the engine, and walked to the shore, standing still for hours. No fishing, no phone calls, just staring at the calm lake. Torres reviewed the first video, replaying Gibbons gazing at the water, face nearly motionless, occasionally pursing his lips as if muttering. Could be a ritual or obsession, Lance said. Torres nodded. No one stares at a lake for 2 hours without a reason. The third week, the behavior repeated precisely. On Wednesday, Gibbons walked the lake's perimeter, carrying a nylon bag. A long zoom camera caught him stopping under an old oak, kneeling. Torres watched closely. Gibbons dug with bare hands, pulled a small tin box from the bag, placed it in the hole, and covered it carefully. The act took 5 minutes. Then he washed his hands in the lake and returned to his truck, expression calm. He just buried something. Torres said, voice low. We need to check tonight. At 10:47 p.m., Torres and Lance returned to the lake. Cold night wind swept the water, crickets humming. They located the oak by GPS coordinates. The soil was fresh, noticeable under flashlight. Torres carefully dug with a small shovel. After a few layers, metal glinted. A round tin box, 15 centimeters wide, lid rusted, sealed with brown tape. Wearing gloves, he opened it. Inside, no weapons or personal items, just neatly folded old newspaper clippings. He unfolded each, the smell of damp paper and rust rising. The first Fort Worth teen vanishes mysteriously. 1985. The second, a black and white photo of the green bike by Lake Benbrook. The third, a 2001 Arlington report on Lisa Donnelly. Young student missing, police without leads. At the bottom, a loose clipping, just a headline. Harold Gibbons, retired engineer, speaks at local church event. Torres read, stunned. He counted 6 clippings total, all tied to missing persons cases in Fort Worth and Arlington, spanning 1985 to 2001. No other evidence, no victim photos, no handwritten notes, no personal items. But keeping and burying these clippings revealed one thing: absolute obsession. What's he doing with these papers? Lance asked quietly. Torres replied, not keeping, he's commemorating. He resealed the box, placed it in an evidence bag, sealed it, and signed Torres October 22, 18. Before leaving, he looked at the lake. The water was still, moonlight reflecting like a mirror. Somewhere in the shadows and night, the past's whispers lingered. The next morning, they brought the tin to the forensic lab. Initial results: no clear fingerprints, only a few unusable dead skin cells, but the outer tape showed DNA compatible with Gibbons's sample. Torres presented the report to Lieutenant Chen. She read it, exhaling long. An innocent man doesn't drive to a lake weekly to bury articles about victims. Torres continued surveillance. 3 more weeks. Each time Gibbons went to the lake, he stopped at the same spot, staring at the water for hours. Torres noted quietly. Time spent 118 minutes, 123 minutes, 109 minutes. No contact with anyone. One afternoon, Gibbons sat on a wooden bench by the shore, opened an old Bible, and read softly. The audio mic caught fragments, justice written in blood, then silence. Torres returned to the station, sitting alone before the surveillance monitor. The old man, with his calm face and prayer habits, was the center of a web of sin dusted over for more than 30 years. He flipped through Strickland's old report, where the scrawled handwritten note still lingered. Don't trust the calm of someone too perfect. This time, Torres didn't just believe, he had seen it with his own eyes. That evening, organizing documents into the file, Torres wrote the final line in the 6th week's surveillance log. Subject exhibits clear obsessive behavior tied to Benbrook Lake and Merritt case. Evidence of ritual revisiting. Recommend next step, warrant for search and seizure. Closing the notebook, he glanced at the clock, 2:14 a.m. outside the window. Fort Worth slept quietly. In the small room, the desk lamp cast light on the file cover's text, Case File B27, Rutpin. Torres knew one small mistake could send 33 years of investigation back into oblivion. The tin box buried under the oak was psychological evidence, not enough to convict. He needed something the law couldn't deny. Harold Gibbons's direct DNA. The plan was meticulously prepared. One Monday morning in early November, the surveillance team installed a hidden camera in the trash area behind the Baptist church, where Gibbons taught every Sunday. The man had a habit of drinking Ozarka bottled water during lessons, then discarding it behind the pulpit. Torres just had to wait. At 9:27 a.m., Gibbons stepped to the pulpit, wearing a light blue shirt, Bible in one hand, half-empty water bottle in the other. The camera captured every move. He unscrewed the cap, took a few sips, set it on the table. After the lesson, Gibbons tidied up, tossed the bottle into the metal trash can behind the church, and left. Torres and technician Lance waited until his car turned out of the lot, then collected the sample. Wearing gloves, they retrieved the bottle, sealed it in a bag, labeled Sample G1118. The bottle looked ordinary, but to Torres, it could be the key to unlocking a door closed for 33 years. He delivered it to Tarrant County's forensic lab, handing it directly to Dr. Lang, the man who helped recover the 1985 hair sample. This time, no genealogy needed, Torres said softly, just a direct comparison. Lang nodded, placing the bottle on a stainless steel table. If the hair's DNA is his, you'll get a 100% match. 3 days of waiting dragged heavily. Torres practically lived in the office, reviewing every crime scene photo, every old Strickland report. Each time he saw the muddy bicycle image, he felt he owed Rachel an answer. On the 3rd night, the desk phone rang. It was Lang, voice steady but weighty. Torres, I've got results. Come now. He reached the lab near midnight. Lang set 2 envelopes on the table, one with the DNA profile from the B27 hair, the other, from the G1118 bottle. He said little, pointing with a pen to 2 sequences on the analysis sheet. Loshi D, 5S818, CSF1P Pox, all perfect matches. Random match probability, 1 in 5.8 trillion. Torres stood silent for seconds, gripping the table's edge. In other words, he said softly, it's the same person. Lang nodded. No doubt, the hair from 1985, and the bottle's DNA belonged to Harold Eugene Gibbons. The lab's air felt thick. Torres stared at the 2 sheets, as if hearing sounds from the past. The phone ringing that night, a panicked mother reporting her missing daughter, wind whistling over the lake. all encapsulated in 2 DNA samples, biological fingerprints, bridging nearly half a century. The next morning, Torres entered the Tarrant County Prosecutor's office, carrying a file nearly 3 inches thick. Prosecutor Lydia McHale, known for caution, read each page silently. Reaching the conclusion, she looked up, eyes stern. "You're certain about the chain of custody? Is the hair sample legally admissible in court?" Torres replied firmly, "Verified. Sample B27 has been sealed intact since 1985. No signs of tampering. And now we have a direct match from Givens." McHale flipped a few more pages, eyeing a photo of Harold at Lake Benbrook, a Bible teacher, 30 years without leaving the place he hid his secret. She set down her pen, signing the petition for arrest warrant. "Do it, detective. Give that girl justice." Torres left the office quietly, warrant in hand. Outside, Fort Worth's sky was gray, a thin rain blanketing the streets. He looked at the bold text atop the paper, "State of Texas versus Harold Eugene Givens." The prosecutor's signature below felt like fate's mark. That afternoon, he assembled the tactical team. A map of Waverly spread across the table. Target is 68, lives alone, may be armed, goal safe apprehension, low profile. Torres paused, then said slowly, "He was once seen as the kind neighbor. Neighbors will watch, media will swarm. We do this right. No noise, no mistakes." The team nodded. Torres checked his watch. The hands read 1940. Rain fell silently outside. In that moment, he recalled Strickland's file note, "Don't trust the calm of someone too perfect." 33 years ago, Strickland was right. Tonight, Torres would finish what the old detective never could. Leaving the station, he glanced at the sealed evidence display. Bag B27, behind protective glass. It sat silently, glowing under the light, proof that time may fade ink, but cannot erase guilt. Rachel's hair, Givens' bottle, and DNA's cold numbers had spoken for what humans silenced for 3 decades. Driving home, Torres turned on the radio. A local news segment mentioned an early-season cold front nearing Texas. He looked through the windshield, raindrops streaking across, reflecting streetlights. Fort Worth's night stayed cold and wet, but in his heart, the fire of investigation blazed again, bright, fierce, and this time, it wouldn't flicker out. At dawn on April 3, 2019, Fort Worth's sky glowed silver gray before an early rain. In the Wedgwood neighborhood, no one noticed unmarked cars quietly parking around Waverly's corner. Radios crackled softly in earpieces. All positions ready. Target inside. No movement detected. In the driver's seat of a black SUV, Detective Evan Torres checked his watch. 5:12 a.m. The arrest warrant for Harold Eugene Givens, 68, signed by Tarrant County Court last night, marked the moment Fort Worth had awaited for 33 years. "Alpha Team, proceed," Torres said into the mic. 2 agents in bulletproof vests approached the front door, while others blocked the rear. The small beige house's porch light still glowed, as if its owner rose early. The door was pounded. 3 short knocks, 1 long. "Fort Worth Police. Open now." No response. 3 seconds later, another pound. The lock snapped, wood splintered, and the house opened under cold flashlight beams. Harold Givens stood in the hallway, gray robe, eyes wide but not panicked. He raised his hands, saying nothing. Torres stepped in, presenting the warrant. "Mr. Harold Eugene Givens, you're under arrest in connection to Rachel Merritt's 1985 disappearance." The man stared, eyes cloudy, voice raspy. 30 years, you're late." Then he fell silent, offering no resistance, as cuffs clicked on. Torres let the tech team search. The house was eerily tidy, walls hung with church photos, a few certificates, shelves of Bibles and sermon notes. But in a back storage room, a heavy musty smell lingered, light, revealing a dusty workbench. On the wall, a Lake Benbrook map, marked with red pen, X's, circles, and April 12, 85 circled in the corner. Torres frowned. Below, a drawer held items in small plastic bags. He opened the first, a silver necklace, heart-shaped pendant, engraved R.M. Torres's heart tightened. He recalled Strickland's 1985 report. Victim wore silver necklace engraved RM, never found. Holding it in gloved hands, light reflected off the scratched silver, like a whisper from the past. Behind a cabinet, an old cardboard box held dozens of clipped articles, all on Texas disappearances from the 1980s to early 2000s. Some yellowed, edges folded, some with handwritten notes. God knows but man does not. At the bottom, a black and white photo of Rachel Merritt from her high school graduation, original, not a newspaper copy. Torres stared at it, then around the room, feeling the man's pious facade crumble in the frigid air. At 6:05 a.m., Givens was let out. Neighbors peeked from porches, some recognizing him, the kindly Bible teacher who greeted them Sundays. A woman in a bathrobe whispered, "God, is that Harold?" Local reporters, tipped off from the courthouse, parked nearby. Fox 4's cameras panned as agents escorted him across the yard. Harold said nothing, only looked up, staring at the gray sky, as if to swallow it whole. At the station, news spread. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram's morning front page blared, "Arrest in 1985 cold case shocks Fort Worth." Below, an old black and white photo of Rachel Merritt by her bike, and a current shot of Harold Givens in cuffs, head slightly bowed. The reporter wrote, "Friendly neighbor, Bible teacher, and former electronics engineer Harold E. Givens charged in the disappearance of a 17-year-old girl 34 years ago. The event stuns Wedgwood, where he was once a moral exemplar." In the interrogation room, Givens sat upright, hands clasped, not requesting a lawyer. Torres started the recorder, voice even, "Care to explain why your house had a Lake Benbrook map and a necklace with the victim's initials?" Harold didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the metal table. Then he spoke, almost a whisper, "I only kept what others forgot." Torres stared. People don't forget a life. But Givens closed his eyes, silent. As the tech team left the house, Torres returned one last time. He stood on the porch, looking over the white fence, where the sun was rising, casting golden light on the quiet neighborhood. Everything seemed peaceful, as if unchanged. Only now, in that silence, the past had been awakened. By noon, NBC Dallas aired a special report. Fort Worth police have arrested a suspect in the 1985 Rachel Merritt disappearance. The suspect, Harold Eugene Givens, 68, faces first-degree murder charges, based on DNA evidence. Social media erupted. Hundreds of comments flooded local news pages. "Can't believe it. I heard him preach every week." Fort Worth has probably never seen a shock like this. Torres returned to the office, placing the B-27 file on his desk, staring at Strickland's old photo of Lake Benbrook. The faded caption remained, "Location where bicycle was found." He muttered to himself, "We lost 30 years just to return to the starting point." But this time, they had finally reached the end. As night fell over Fort Worth, the Baptist church's lights still glowed. The wooden door stood ajar, the interior empty. The voice that once preached every Sunday morning now silent. On the pulpit, a Bible lay open to Psalm 139, "If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there." Outside, police cars remained parked at the street's end, red and blue lights reflecting on tiled roofs, signaling that sin, though delayed, had finally met the light. The interrogation room on the second floor of Fort Worth Police Headquarters was frigid, despite the air conditioning set to moderate. Pale fluorescent light cast shadows on gray walls, outlining the silver-haired man sitting motionless. Harold Eugene Givens, 68, hands on the metal table, back straight, eyes fixed on an undefined point ahead. Outside, the hallway clock ticked past 7 p.m. 9 hours since the interrogation began. No statement, no reaction, no request for a lawyer. Only silence, thick and heavy, stretching until even the detective's pen taps sounded like a hammer on metal. Detective Evan Torres sat across, eyes steady but not angry. He'd handled dozens of interrogations, but none weighed like this. Before him was a man once seen as a pillar of trust in the community, now accused in a disappearance over 3 decades old. He gently placed the file on the table, flipping to the first page. The paper's rustle echoed in the quiet room. "Mr. Gibbons," Torres said slowly, "do you want to say anything before I read your rights again?" Gibbons didn't respond. He kept staring at the table, eyes blurred under the light. Torres continued, "We have your DNA, collected from an Ozarka bottle at the church. It matches perfectly with a hair found near Lake Benbrook in 1985, where Rachel Merritt vanished. Care to comment?" A faint twitch at the corner of his mouth, then silence reclaimed the room. Torres studied the expression, a micro-expression lasting less than half a second, enough to betray a flicker of fear mixed with denial, a natural reaction an innocent person wouldn't suppress. As the 10th hour passed, Torres shifted tactics. He placed a black and white photo of Rachel on the table's center. "Rachel Merritt, 17, worked at Brookshire's Market. She was last seen talking to you before disappearing. What did you say to her, Harold?" For the first time in the interrogation, Gibbons slightly raised his head. Cloudy eyes reflected the light, his voice raspy, slow. "I remember her." Silence fell. Torres held his breath, waiting. Gibbons stared at the photo, whispering, "It was hot that day. She needed a ride. I only stopped out of kindness." Torres didn't reply, leaning forward, eyes locked on the face opposite. For a moment, Gibbons' features tightened, eyebrow twitching, chin dipping, mouth trembling, a chain of micro-expressions, typical of guilt and confusion. Torres noted it mentally. "You said she needed a ride. Then what?" Gibbons clenched his hands, thumb brushing his index finger, a sign of suppressed anxiety. "I drove her near Highway 377. She said she was meeting a friend. I left. That's it." His voice was even, but his eyes no longer met Torres's, drifting to the corner where the camera hummed. Torres slid the photo closer, then pulled a small item from an envelope, the silver necklace engraved RM. Its metal gleamed under the light. "This was found in your room, with a Lake Benbrook map. Care to explain?" A dense silence. Gibbons stared at the necklace, throat swallowing hard, chest heaving. Torres saw the muscle twitch in his right jaw, a physiological response to traumatic memory. Finally, he spoke softly, voice nearly trembling. "I found it, near the lake, years ago. I kept it thinking God wanted me to pray for her." Torres locked eyes, voice low. "Pray for someone you buried under mud and water?" The question cut like a knife. For an instant, Gibbons' face flickered, his eyes blinked rapidly, 3 times, upper lids twitching, pupils contracting, a reflex tied to real memory. Then he closed his eyes, hiding his expression. Torres knew he'd hit a nerve. He softened his tone, almost persuasive. "Harold, 33 years have passed. She deserves to rest. You know that better than anyone." But instead of answering, Gibbons slowly opened his eyes, looking at the camera. His voice was low, raspy. "If God forgives me, you don't need to." Then he leaned back, hands clasped, gaze distant. Torres said no more. He stopped the recorder, signed the report, and left the room. In the hallway, Prosecutor Lydia McHale waited. "Did he confess?" she asked. Torres shook his head. "No, but he just incriminated himself enough. DNA, evidence, behavior, words, all align." McHale paused, then said softly, "A man who could preach salvation his whole life, but couldn't save his own soul." Torres glanced through the small window, where Gibbons sat still, eyes vacant, staring at Rachel's photo on the table. His expression was no longer defiance, but fracture of a soul too weary to keep hiding. Before leaving, Torres wrote the final note in the report. Subject remained silent for 9 hours. Spoke upon mention of victim's name. Demonstrated involuntary guilt response when shown image of Benbrook Lake. Case ready for formal indictment. Outside, night rain fell on Fort Worth, shimmering on silent streets, and in that cold room, Harold Gibbons' silence spoke for everything. On April 12, 2019, 10 days after Harold Gibbons' arrest, Tarrant County Crime Lab technicians began re-examining all evidence from bag B27, sealed since 1985. The bag was opened under Dr. Lang and Prosecutor Lydia McHale's supervision. with Detective Evan Torres watching every move through the lab's glass partition. 33 years later, the forgotten evidence was reawakened amid the clatter of metal tools and glaring white light. Lang unsealed the second bag, a red fabric scrap collected near Rachel's bicycle at Lake Benbrook. The original report described it as part of a cloth or bag, no blood, limited value. Using new material analysis tech, Lang placed the fabric under a scanning electron microscope. The magnified image appeared on screen, worn fibers, clinging to tiny glinting metallic particles. He zoomed closer. The particles reflected light characteristic of automotive paint. "This isn't natural dirt," Lang said, voice calm but certain. "We're looking at paint microparticles." Torres stepped closer, eyes glued to the screen. "Could it match Gibbons's vehicle?" Lang nodded. He switched to a Raman spectrometer for chemical composition. Results showed an energy spectrum matching metallic silver acrylic paint, code M572, used exclusively by Ford for 1983, 1985 F-150s. At the same time, DMV records confirmed Harold Gibbons registered a silver Ford F-150, plate TX2, N1742, claimed sold in 1986 to a non-existent buyer. Torres exhaled slowly. 30 years, and the paint still speaks the truth. Lang gave a faint smile. "Paint doesn't lie, detective. It just waits for someone to listen." After the fabric, the second item was unsealed, the silver necklace engraved RM, found in Gibbons's storage room. Technicians scanned residue inside the clasp, swabbing for epithelial cells. DNA was extracted alongside Rachel's genetic profile from a hairbrush her family provided in 1986, and Gibbons's new sample. Results appeared hours later, two perfectly aligned genetic graphs, one Rachel Merritt's, one Harold Gibbons. Torres read the results, a chill running down his spine. "That means," Lang nodded, "he touched this item at the same time as the victim. Not just a finder, but someone there." Crime scene analysts expanded the examination. The clasp had a 1.8 centimeters horizontal scratch, with oxidation suggesting a forceful impact, likely yanked during a struggle. They also found trace calcium and iron in the RM engraving, possibly from human skin. All findings were documented in digital photos, sent directly to the prosecutor's office. Torres stood outside the glass, watching the technicians move, his heart both cold and clear. The scattered pieces of 34 years now formed an airtight logical chain. The hair in bag B27 carried Harold Gibbons's DNA. The red fabric held silver paint particles, matching a 1983 Ford F-150, Gibbons's truck. The RM necklace bore dual DNA from Rachel and Gibbons. The tin box buried under the oak showed his obsession with the case. No room for doubt. The evidence chain closed, telling the story he tried to bury. Prosecutor McHale stepped in, holding a printed report. "If the jury sees these charts, we don't just have an accusation, we have a history reborn." She paused, eyes on Torres. "You know Gibbons's and Rachel's DNA on the same item, found in his house. That's the dagger that ends all debate." Torres gave a slight nod, voice low. She left a trail to speak for herself. He glanced through the glass, where the necklace gleamed silver under the spotlight. For years it lay quiet in a dark corner, waiting to be found as evidence of truth, and of a youth cut short. By afternoon, the forensic lab finalized the comprehensive report. The final line was bolded: "All physical and genetic evidence establishes direct connection between victim Rachel Merritt, DOB November 3, 1968, and suspect Harold Eugene Gibbons, DOB March 11, 1938. Probability of unrelated source, 1 in 10 trillion. Torres read the number over and over, 10 trillion. A probability so small it was nearly zero, yet it was the entirety of the justice he sought. He signed the confirmation, then carefully stamped the file. Final forensic report. Merritt Case 85-174. That evening, he brought a copy of the results to the prosecutor's office. Lydia McHale greeted him with a silent nod. She looked through the photos, the charts, then closed the thick file. "Detective Torres," she said, "we can start preparing for the preliminary hearing." This isn't a hypothesis anymore. This is the truth. As he left the building, Fort Worth was cloaked in a thin mist. Streetlights cast golden beams onto the wet ground, just like the night in 1985 when Rachel vanished. Torres paused for a moment, looking toward the distant Benbrook Lake. In his mind, he pictured the water rippling gently under the night breeze, reflecting the silent testimony of that girl from years ago. The old evidence, fabric scraps, strands of hair, the necklace, were no longer just scientific proof. They were the memories of a city, a reminder that justice may come late, but when it arrives, it never misses anyone. Torres returned to his car, placing the file on the passenger seat. On the cover, black ink stood clear under the light. Case file B27, complete. He let out a soft sigh, his hand lightly touching the edge of the paper, as if touching a soul just set free. After the forensic results were released, Detective Evan Torres didn't stop. Though the Merritt case was perfectly closed on paper, a doubt lingered in his heart. Was Harold Givens merely the lone killer of 1985, or had his pattern of behavior started earlier and continued after? Torres reopened the old Texas DPS database, searching for unsolved missing persons cases within a 100-mile radius of Fort Worth from 1983 to 1987. The results showed two names familiar to any investigator who'd read the Dallas-Tarrant area files: Carolyn Watts case, Dallas 1984, an 18-year-old girl vanished while biking home from work, no body, no suspects. Denise Colton case, Dallas, 1986, a 20-year-old community college student, disappeared after her car broke down near I-20. Torres printed the files for both cases, spreading them out alongside an old Fort Worth map. Their disappearance points lay along a route from Camp Bowie to Benbrook, extending toward Dallas County, matching the path Givens had claimed he often drove to religious group meetings in the 80s. A clear behavioral axis emerged: same area, same approach, young female victims, alone, always vanishing in remote areas near lakes or highways. He requested permission from the Dallas County Bureau of Investigation to access evidence from the two old cases. The forensic specialist there found a piece of duct tape from the Watts case, and a fragment of jacket fabric from the Colton case, still preserved in storage. Torres sent both samples to the Austin lab, where the Merritt evidence had been processed, requesting a DNA comparison with Givens. 2 weeks later, the report came back. The results were inconclusive. In the 1984 Watts case sample, there was degraded male DNA, not enough to confirm, but with 8/15 loci matching Givens' profile, indicating a possible distant relation, or same individual. In the 1986 Colton case, only silver paint microparticles, similar to type M572 from a Ford F-150 were found, but no biological DNA remained. Lang, the forensic team leader, stated plainly in the report, "The signs suggest a high likelihood of the same perpetrator, but the degradation level of the samples is insufficient for 100% identification. The evidence is only supportive, not independently prosecutable." Torres sat staring at the cold numbers on the screen, feeling the familiar sting of frustration. He knew these could be two more lives buried in darkness, but the law didn't allow prosecution based on inference and coincidence. He brought the entire file to the Tarrant County Prosecutor's office, presenting it to Lydia McHale. In a nearly 2-hour internal meeting, McHale reviewed each DNA chart, each behavioral map. Finally, she placed her hand on the Merritt file, thick, heavy, complete, and looked at Torres. "Evan, I believe you. I believe Harold Givens didn't stop at one. But if we bring all 3 cases to court at once, a single piece of dismissed evidence could let him deny everything. We can't let that happen." Torres stayed silent, his eyes heavy. McHale continued, "The Rachel Merritt case has an airtight chain of evidence: DNA, physical, psychological, behavioral. It's the solid foundation for a conviction. I want to focus all resources on this case first. Once he's sentenced to life, we can pursue the other 2 cases under a pattern of crime. But we only have one shot to ensure complete justice." Torres nodded. He understood, but it wasn't easy to accept. He held the Dallas map in his hands, where red dots marked where Carolyn Watts and Denise Colton vanished, then folded it, carefully placing it in another file, labeled in small black pen, pending review. That afternoon, he returned to the cold case office. Sunlight slanted through the window, illuminating a whiteboard dense with arrows, circles and symbols. At the center was still the name Raquel Merritt, 1985, now circled in red. Below it, Torres added two names in smaller print, C. Watts, 1984, and D. Colton, 1986, and circled them in blue. He stood silently before the board, lost in thought for a long time. He knew justice sometimes required small, even painful steps. One person would be convicted, but other souls might still remain unfound. As night fell over Fort Worth, the office lights stayed on. Torres sat alone, writing the final line in an internal report. Givens is likely linked to at least two other missing persons cases, Dallas 1984, 1986. However, to ensure the certainty of the conviction and avoid legal errors, it is recommended to prosecute only the Merritt case in the initial phase. The other cases are temporarily classified for further investigation. He set down the pen, closing the file. In the dim light, the bolded text case file B27, primary charge approved on the cover glinted like metal. Outside, the city sank into silence. But somewhere between Fort Worth and Dallas, Torres knew, unanswered questions still hung in the darkness, and he would return. When time and justice intersected once more, the Tarrant County Prosecutor's Office preparation room stayed lit through the night. On the wooden table, covered with files, papers were numbered in red ink: Forensic Analysis, Bag B27, Witness Records 1985, 2019, Psychological Profile, H. Givens. At the center, a thick black file was labeled, State of Texas v. Harold E. Eugene Givens, Murder Without a Body. Prosecutor Travis Hunt, assigned to replace Lydia McHale for the preliminary trial, was a rare Texas expert in no-body cases. He knew well that convicting someone for murder without a victim's body was always a perilous legal puzzle. A single misstep in the evidence chain could collapse the entire case. But Travis trusted what Detective Evan Torres had done, a flawless investigation built on science and extraordinary patience. Hunt sat with Torres and Dr. Lang in the first strategy meeting. We have Givens' DNA on the hair, the necklace, and paint microparticles from the F-150, Hunt began. But we still don't have a body. The jury will waver if the defense says no body, no crime. So I need every piece of quantitative evidence, not just technical, but it has to tell its own story. Torres responded, voice firm. Each DNA sample is a statement. We have an entire conversation between him and the victim. The biggest issue lay in forensic genealogy, the technology used for the first time in Texas courts at this scale. Though cases like the Golden State Killer had proven its effectiveness, using genetic data from civilian databases remained controversial. Givens' defense attorney immediately filed a motion to suppress the evidence, arguing that genealogy DNA violates privacy rights and was not collected through judicial process. In the closed preliminary hearing, the atmosphere was taut as a wire. Travis Hunt presented a detailed explanation. The defendant's DNA chain was collected from a water bottle he discarded in public, entirely legal under current law. The comparison with GED match was solely to identify relatives for tracing, after which the entire process was verified with direct DNA. There's no privacy violation here, only science. The defense attorney objected. Forensic genealogy hasn't been vetted by federal agencies. No one guarantees the accuracy of the data chain. Hunt glanced at Dr. Lang, signaling. The old man stood, holding a stack of papers. Your Honor, Lang said, I've been in forensics for 42 years. The gene matching system we used has an error rate lower than 1 in 10 trillion. And I'll add, the FBI has been testing this technology since 2017. I have a letter from the FBI Quantico office confirming 100% compatibility with CODIS standards. He presented the letter with a red seal. The courtroom fell silent. The judge skimmed it, then nodded. This letter is sufficient to prove the method's legality. The motion to suppress is denied. A pen tapped the wooden desk. Denied. Torres sat in the back row clenching his fists. In that moment, he knew all those years spent rummaging through cold storage, those nights poring over data lines on a screen, hadn't been in vain. Science had been recognized as a living witness. After the preliminary hearing, Hunt held a brief press conference before dozens of reporters. Camera flashes flickered as he declared, "The Tarrant County Court has just approved the use of forensic genealogy evidence in the Rachel Merritt case. This is a first milestone in Texas, affirming the value of forensic science in closing cases thought long forgotten." The next morning, headlines blared. Texas court allows genealogy DNA in 34-year-old murder case. Justice through science, the Merritt precedent. Meanwhile, Givens' defense team shifted tactics. They no longer contested the DNA technique, but focused on psychology, trying to paint a kindly old man, haunted by the past but not a criminal. They argued Givens might have kept the necklace out of guilt for not saving Rachel, and that the DNA match was from touching the item during a 1985 community search. Hunt listened, giving only a slight smile. He responded briefly in an internal meeting. No searcher keeps a victim's item in their home for 30 years, then buries old newspapers where she vanished. We have enough to peel back his moral facade layer by layer. Torres prepared the presentation: behavioral maps, crime scene photos, DNA graphs, and surveillance video of Givens burying a tin box by Lake Benbrook. He told Hunt, "When the jury sees him standing by the lake for hours, they'll know it wasn't repentance, it was a sinner's ritual." A week before the trial, Hunt finalized the official 14-count indictment, stating clearly, defendant Harold Eugene Givens, with intent and premeditation, deprived citizen Rachel Merritt of her life on April 12, 1985, in the Benbrook area, Fort Worth, Texas. Although the body has not been found, the chain of physical and biological evidence proves the crime beyond all reasonable doubt. That evening, after everyone had left, Torres stayed in the office, staring at the murder without a body file before him. He flipped to the first page, rereading the opening line Travis Hunt had written in blue ink: "Justice delayed is not justice denied, especially when DNA remembers what silence forgot." Outside the window, Fort Worth lit up. Wind from Lake Benbrook carried cold mist and echoes of a story nearing its end. On June 27, 2019, Courtroom 3 of the Tarrant County Courthouse was packed. In the spectator seats were aged faces of those who lived in Rachel Merritt's time, former teachers, neighbors, classmates, and strangers who grew up haunted by the 34-year-old disappearance. No one spoke. The room was filled only with the slow hum of the ceiling fan and the rustle of reporters' notepads. At the front, defendant Harold Eugene Givens, 68, wore a gray prison uniform, hands neatly on the table. He was uncuffed, per regulations for elderly defendants. The white light cast a pallor on his face, his eyes sunken, hands trembling slightly but poised. No expression, no pleas, no reaction, just a silence heavy as stone. Prosecutor Travis Hunt stepped to the podium, his voice clear and measured. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you will hear the story of a girl robbed of her 17 years, a family waiting 34 years, and a city that never healed. This case has no body, but it has something stronger: science, truth, and a memory that never fades." He held up an enlarged photo, a silver necklace engraved with RM, its gleam silencing the room. This was Rachel Merritt's, worn the last day she was seen, and the DNA found on it, ladies and gentlemen, belongs to the man sitting there. Hunt continued, projecting a map of Lake Benbrook, where the bicycle was found. On screen, red markers showed the locations of each piece of evidence, each soil sample, each coordinate police recollected after 3 decades. His voice lowered. "The defendant claims he only gave her a ride. But here, ladies and gentlemen, is the map he kept for 30 years, annotated, marked, revisited weekly. An innocent man doesn't act like that." The jury sat silent. In the back row, a few bowed their heads, unable to look. Detective Evan Torres was called to the witness stand. In a white shirt and dark vest, he held a thick yellowed file. His voice was low but firm. I didn't start this case. When Rachel vanished, I was 3 years old, but 33 years later, I found a sealed bag in the county's cold storage, marked Bag B27. Inside were a hair, a fabric scrap, and a handwritten note by Sergeant Dale Strickland. That day, I didn't think I was holding an entire case. I just wanted to know why a girl had been forgotten like that. On screen, an image of B27 hair sample appeared, magnified in detail. The light highlighted Strickland's scrawled note, Merritt Case, Fort Worth 1985. Torres paused for a few seconds, scanning the room. No one moved. The courtroom air felt thick enough to touch. I sent that hair to the Austin lab, he said, voice catching. The results matched Harold Givens' DNA perfectly. 33 years of silence, and one hair spoke for that girl. All I did was help her find her voice again. A reporter quietly jotted the line. Later a front-page headline, a hair that spoke after 33 years. Hunt pressed on. He presented Givens' behavioral map, drawn from GPS, surveillance, and statements. On screen, a covert camera video showed Givens digging a tin box under an oak by Lake Benbrook. The courtroom held its breath. No sound, only wind through the mic. Givens in the video bent down, hands trembling as he placed the box in the ground. When he stood, moonlight lit his face. The first time the jury saw the eyes of a man burying his own guilt. The defense attorney countered, Mr. Torres, do you have proof Rachel Merritt is dead? Was a body, blood, or evidence of murder found? Torres replied calmly, no, we don't have a body, but we have the defendant's DNA on the victim's item, paint from his truck, evidence concealment, and 33 years of obsession. In investigations, some cases lack a body, but the truth remains intact. This is one of them. Travis Hunt stood, approaching the jury, voice deliberate. Did you hear that? No body, but there is justice. There is guilt buried, and now unearthed. With the tin box, the necklace, and the DNA even God couldn't erase. Givens sat still throughout, unresponsive. He never looked at the screen, at Torres, or contested the accusations. Only occasionally, when Lake Benbrook's image appeared, his throat twitched, fingers tightening on his lap, a subtle sign only someone like Torres, watching for years, would notice. As the evidence presentation concluded, Hunt displayed the final photo, Rachel Merritt, 17, in her Brookshire's Market uniform, smiling brightly, hair tied high. The faded image projected onto the large wall, and for a moment, the courtroom fell into absolute silence. This, Hunt said, is the person Fort Worth forgot. This is the person Harold Givens thought no one would remember. But today, she's back. Not in flesh, but in truth. The judge lightly tapped the gavel, announcing a recess. As people stood, no one spoke. A few elderly spectators shed tears. Younger ones clenched their fists. Torres stepped down from the witness stand. Glancing at Givens, the man still sat motionless, eyes vacant, as if hearing something distant, from beneath the waters of Lake Benbrook years ago. Outside, the June breeze swept across the courthouse steps. Torres paused, looking up at the bronze plaque engraved with justice through truth. He gave a slight nod. 34 years, a city, a strand of hair, and at last, the truth had been spoken, amid the silence. 2 days later, as the trial entered its hand, Tarrant County Crime Lab sent prosecutor Travis Hunt a special report. Its title brief, but breathtaking, recovered 911 audio. April 1985, preliminary match confirmed. In the office, Hunt, Detective Evan Torres, and Dr. Lang opened the envelope containing the drive. This was the infamous 911 call from that year. A trembling male voice saying, "The girl's still alive, don't look anymore." The original was lost in storage by the late 80s, but a distorted copy had been kept on Sergeant Dale Strickland's personal tape. When Givens was arrested, Torres had sent that copy to the Federal Audio Restoration Team in Quantico. Now, after hundreds of hours of noise filtering and frequency calibration, the latest AI technology had achieved what no one dared hope: near complete restoration of the voice's timbre. The small room was lit only by the screen's glow. Torres gripped his hands tightly as Hunt pressed play. Static crackled, then the man's voice emerged, hoarse, heavy, slow, as if dragged through decades of dust. "The girl, still alive, don't look anymore." Panting breaths followed, then a metallic clink, later identified as a truck key turning. The room stayed silent. Lang leaned forward, trembling slightly. "I've heard the old version dozens of times, but this, it's far clearer. We can identify the full vocal format." Torres turned to Hunt. "If this is Gibbons, it's the clincher. No more hiding behind religion or memory." The recording was sent to the FBI Voice Analysis Unit, experts in identifying voices through voice print, an audio signature, akin to a fingerprint. They compared frequency, pitch, pronunciation, and speech habits, from Gibbons' church sermon tapes to the 911 call voice. 3 days later, the results returned with a bolded headline: "Voice print match, 98.4% probability. Subject, Harold Eugene Gibbons." The FBI confirmed the match was too strong to be coincidental. Distinctive traits included a slight R trill at word endings, an elongated U in anymore, and a short, sharp inhale before speaking, a reflex from vocal cord damage. Gibbons' medical records verified he'd suffered a throat injury in a 1979 work accident. When the results were submitted to the court, Hunt looked at Torres, saying softly, "Justice just found its own voice." The next morning, the courtroom was more crowded than usual. The press dubbed it the voice evidence, the first voice evidence presented in a nobody case in Texas. Reporters packed the hallway, cameras lined up. As the judge struck the gavel, the room hushed. Hunt stood, holding a small USB labeled in red 911 call, restored. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, "for 34 years, only one person heard this voice. Today you'll hear it with us." He signaled. The tape played in the silent room. "The girl, still alive, don't look anymore." A few spectators sobbed. The sound was faint but hauntingly clear. The voice stretched the final word, like a desperate command. When the clip ended, Hunt displayed the next slide: FBI voice print analysis. 2 blue graphs, one from the 1985 911 call, one from Gibbons' 2016 sermon, matched wave for wave. Hunt faced the jury, voice slow but firm. "A voice cannot lie. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the voice of the man sitting before you. The man who called 911 the night Rachel Merritt vanished, not to save, but to end the search for her." The defense tried to object. "Voice print analysis can't prove criminal action, only identify the speaker." Hunt didn't flinch. "Exactly, but listen to the words. The girl's still alive, don't look anymore. No one says that unless they want to bury the truth. No one but the person who knew she was no longer alive." The judge nodded, allowing the tape into the official record. In that moment, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Gibbons sat still, eyes down, lips pursed. But Torres, from the witness row, saw what only a seasoned investigator would: a slight twitch in the left cheek muscle, a flicker in the eyelid, signs of a body reacting to rekindled memory. He knew the man was hearing his own voice again, realizing that 30 years of silence had crumbled. After the tape played a second time, Hunt returned to the prosecution table, voice low. 34 years ago, he called, believing a few words could stop the world from searching for the girl. Today, those same words will end him. As they left the courtroom, reporters swarmed the hallway. A headline was drafted on a phone and appeared in that afternoon's news. FBI voice match confirms. 911 caller was Harold Gibbons. The sound of guilt. Torres stood at the hallway's end, looking through a glass window where light spilled onto the tile floor. He recalled the rainy Fort Worth night, when he first heard the garbled recording, its broken voice lost in the wind. Now, science had brought it back, and with it, justice had spoken. That evening, in his report to the prosecution, Torres wrote briefly, "Voice print confirms Gibbons as 911 caller. This is the final piece of the puzzle. No remaining doubt." At the page's end he added a line, not for the file but for himself. 30 years of silence, now he's spoken for himself. Outside, wind from Lake Benbrook swept through the city. Under the dim moonlight, the water rippled, as if reflecting that voice, a voice that had exposed its speaker, after 34 years hidden in the dark. 2 days after the trial entered its second week, Tarrant County Crime Lab sent prosecutor Travis Hunt a special report, its title brief but breathtaking: Recovered 911 Audio, April 1985, Preliminary Match Confirmed. In the office, Hunt Detective Evan Torres and Dr. Lang opened the envelope containing the drive. This was the infamous 911 call from that year, a trembling male voice saying, "The girl's still alive, don't look anymore." The original was lost in storage by the late 80s, but a distorted copy had been kept on Sergeant Dale Strickland's personal tape. When Givens was arrested, Torres had sent that copy to the Federal Audio Restoration Team in Quantico. Now, after hundreds of hours of noise filtering and frequency calibration, the latest AI technology had achieved what no one dared hope: near complete restoration of the voice's timbre. The small room was lit only by the screen's glow. Torres gripped his hands tightly as Hunt pressed play. Static crackled, then the man's voice emerged, hoarse, heavy, slow, as if dragged through decades of dust. "The girl's still alive, don't look anymore." Panting breaths followed, then a metallic clink, later identified as a truck key turning. The room stayed silent. Lang leaned forward, trembling slightly. "I've heard the old version dozens of times, but this, it's far clearer. We can identify the full vocal format." Torres turned to Hunt. "If this is Givens, it's the clincher. No more hiding behind religion or memory." The recording was sent to the FBI Voice Analysis Unit, experts in identifying voices through voiceprint, an audio signature akin to a fingerprint. They compared frequency, pitch, pronunciation, and speech habits from Givens' church sermon tapes to the 911 call voice. 3 days later, the results returned with a bolded headline: "Voice print match, 98.4% probability, subject, Harold Eugene Givens." The FBI confirmed the match was too strong to be coincidental. Distinctive traits included a slight trill at word endings, an elongated "you in anymore," and a short, sharp inhale before speaking, a reflex from vocal cord damage. Givens' medical records verified he'd suffered a throat injury in a 1979 work accident. When the results were submitted to the court, Hunt looked at Torres, saying softly, "Justice just found its own voice." The next morning, the courtroom was more crowded than usual. The press dubbed it the voice evidence, the first voice evidence presented in a no-body case in Texas. Reporters packed the hallway, cameras lined up. As the judge struck the gavel, the room hushed. Hunt stood, holding a small USB labeled in red, 911 call, restored. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, "for 34 years, only one person heard this voice. Today you'll hear it with us." He signaled. The tape played in the silent room. "The girl's still alive, don't look anymore." A few spectators sobbed. The sound was faint, but hauntingly clear. The voice stretched the final word like a desperate command. When the clip ended, Hunt displayed the next slide: FBI voice print analysis. 2 blue graphs, one from the 1985 911 call, one from Givens' 2016 sermon, matched wave for wave. Hunt faced the jury, voice slow but firm. "A voice cannot lie. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the voice of the man sitting before you. The man who called 911 the night Rachel Merritt vanished, not to save, but to end the search for her." The defense tried to object. "Voice print analysis can't prove criminal action, only identify the speaker." Hunt didn't flinch. "Exactly, but listen to the words. The girl's still alive, don't look anymore. No one says that unless they want to bury the truth. No one but the person who knew she was no longer alive." The judge nodded, allowing the tape into the official record. In that moment, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Givens sat still, eyes down, lips pursed. But Torres, from the witness row, saw what only a seasoned investigator would: a slight twitch in the left cheek muscle, a flicker in the eyelid, signs of a body reacting to rekindled memory. He knew the man was hearing his own voice again, realizing that 30 years of silence had crumbled. After the tape played a second time, Hunt returned to the prosecution table, voice low. 34 years ago, he called believing a few words could stop the world from searching for the girl. Today, those same words will end him. As they left the courtroom, reporters swarmed the hallway. A headline was drafted on a phone and appeared in that afternoon's news. FBI voice match confirms 911 caller was Harold Givens. The sound of guilt. Torres stood at the hallway's end, looking through a glass window where light spilled onto the tile floor. He recalled the rainy Fort Worth night when he first heard the garbled recording, its broken voice lost in the wind. Now science had brought it back, and with it, justice had spoken. That evening, in his report to the prosecution, Torres wrote briefly, voice print confirms Givens as 911 caller. This is the final piece of the puzzle. No remaining doubt. At the page's end, he added a line, not for the file but for himself. 30 years of silence, now he's spoken for himself. Outside, wind from Lake Benbrook swept through the city. Under the dim moonlight, the water rippled, as if reflecting that voice, a voice that had exposed its speaker, after 34 years hidden in the dark. 2 months after Harold Eugene Givens' life sentence took effect, the Tarrant County Sheriff Headquarters was lit up at night. Gone were the tense keyboard clicks of the trial period, replaced by the steady hum of printers and the soft tap of pens on report notebooks. The cold case unit, led by Detective Evan Torres, was finalizing the after-action report, the most detailed investigative summary in Fort Worth's history, over 600 pages, evaluating every step, every error, and every lesson from the 1985 Rachel Merritt case. On the first page, the bolded title read, Fort Worth Protocol, Operational Framework for Cold Case Reintegration, 2020. It wasn't just a report, it was the legacy of a 34-year quest for truth, transformed into a handbook for all of Texas's cold case investigators. Torres sat in the meeting room with Dr. Lang, prosecutor Travis Hunt, and an FBI representative from Quantico. On the large screen, the first slide appeared, Lesson 1, The Chain of Custody Never Sleeps. Torres began, voice low and clear, if there's one thing we take from the Merritt case, it's this: the chain of custody is the lifeblood of justice. A properly sealed, meticulously documented evidence bag can survive decades, even when people forget. He recounted the moment he found bag B27 in cold storage, a cloudy nylon bag, edges stained, but still bearing Sergeant Dale Strickland's signature and original seal. Without him, if someone had reopened that bag, a single clerical error could have meant we'd never trace Harold Givens. Travis Hunt added, from now on, all old evidence files in the state must be digitally scanned, chain of custody encrypted, and stored at 2 independent facilities. That's the first part of the Fort Worth Protocol. The second slide appeared, Lesson 2, The Power of Forensic Genealogy. Dr. Lang explained, in 2018, we first combined forensic genealogy, a method once questioned legally, but the Merritt case proved that when used to standard, it's not only legal but absolutely precise. The integration of civilian genetic data with CODIS verification opened a new era, parallel lineage, tracing with biological cross-checking. The FBI representative confirmed that, post-Merritt, they launched Project Crosslink, enabling genealogy result sharing across states within a secure legal framework. Fort Worth's story became a case study in Quantico's training program. Slide 3, Lesson 3, The Human Element. Torres projected an old photo, the B27, hair sample bag under cold light. We have technology, machines, but the most critical factor remains human. A technician in 1985 didn't discard that hair. A sergeant carefully handwritten notes. A prosecutor dared to accept new evidence. All of them kept this case alive through time. He paused, then displayed a line on the screen. Justice is not a moment, it is maintenance. The room fell silent. Everyone understood that this lesson could never be replaced by any software or algorithm. Next, Lesson 4, Record Management and Missing Persons Reform. After the Merritt case, the Texas Department of Justice issued a decree requiring all missing persons files pre-2000 to be digitized and synced to the NAMUSE-TX database. Any case with biological evidence, no matter how small, must be retested every 5 years with updated DNA technology. Additionally, missing persons files would be cross-linked with property, medical, and expanded genealogy data. Torres presented the statistics. In the first year of implementation, 47 missing persons cases in Texas were reactivated, 5 identified potential suspects. It all started with Fort Worth's lesson. Travis Hunt added, "We didn't just solve a case, we changed how Texas confronts its past." The final slide displayed a simple line, Fort Worth Protocol, Standard of Persistence. The FBI representative read the conclusion aloud. The Fort Worth Protocol will become the official training model for Texas's Cold Case Investigator Certification Program starting in 2021. The Merritt case, 1985, is not just a forensic success, but a symbol of patience, integrity, and the belief that no case is truly dead if someone dares to reopen it. Torres sat quietly, watching the slide fade. He felt no triumph, only a calm tinged with fatigue. In the corner, the B-27 bag sat in a glass case, now bearing a new label, Exhibit of the Fort Worth Protocol, Case Resolved 2019. As the meeting ended, Lang approached, placing a hand on Torres' shoulder. "You know Strickland would be proud. He started this file with a pencil, and you finished it with DNA." Torres gave a faint smile. "We just walked the same road. He started it. I just turned the light back on." That afternoon, Texas newspapers published a special feature, From Dust to DNA, How Fort Worth Changed Cold Case Policing Forever. Below was an image of Detective Torres beside the evidence case, with a new bronze inscription on the headquarters wall, Fort Worth Protocol, every file matters, every trace counts. As night fell, he drove past Lake Benbrook, where moonlight shimmered on the water. No police, no cameras, just wind and bats gliding in the dark. He stopped, rolled down the window, letting the breeze flow through, listening to the silence, once tainted by lies 34 years ago. Torres whispered, as if concluding the journey, "Justice doesn't need to be swift. It just needs someone patient enough to walk the whole path." And in Fort Worth, Texas, from then on, every cold case began with a reminder printed on its file, "Follow the Fort Worth Protocol." Fort Worth, Texas, summer 2025. The third floor of the Tarrant County Sheriff's Building stayed lit as the clock neared midnight. The cold case unit room was quiet, bathed in the soft blue glow of an old desk lamp, once Sergeant Dale Strickland's in 1985. Under that light, Detective Evan Torres sat alone. On the desk, amid thick files, was a yellowed envelope, its handwritten label still legible, despite faded ink. B-27, hair sample, Rachel Merritt. He gently opened the envelope, revealing a clear plastic bag holding a single hair, the evidence that survived 4 decades, floods, storage moves, indifference, and oblivion. The hair, fine as silk, nearly invisible under the light, had pulled the city back to its memory, forcing justice to open its eyes again. Torres touched the bag's edge, not to hold, but to give thanks. On the wall before him, Rachel Merritt's faded photo, a 17-year-old with light brown hair, bright eyes, and a smile yet to fully grow. Taken a week before she vanished outside Brookshire's Market. The glass was scratched, the photo's corner curled, but her eyes still gazed at the silent man in the room. Torres breathed slowly, opening a small notebook, his journal since reopening B-27. He flipped to the last page, where an unfinished line from 2 years ago remained. "Justice is maintenance." He paused, writing beneath it, "And memory, sometimes just a fragile hair, endures longer than time." Outside Fort Worth slept. Night winds carried the scent of asphalt and distant trucks on I-30. Not far away, Lake Benbrook lay still, its dark water like an old mirror. A small plaque stood there, engraved in silver, in memory of Rachel Merritt, 1968, 1985. The city remembered. Every April 3rd, Rachel's disappearance date, the lake's lights burned all night. Torres never missed one. But this year, he stayed away. He wanted to be where the story began, the cold case room, where that hair still lay like the heart of memory. On the desk, a Fort Worth protocol plaque sat in a wooden frame, naming him as the first investigation lead to apply it. But for Torres, the real reward wasn't there. He recalled the morning of the sentencing, light through the courtroom window, illuminating Harold Given's aged face, the man who preached scripture, yet buried justice. His final words echoed like a distant hum. "She never left me." Perhaps Givens wasn't wrong. Rachel never left any of them. Not Fort Worth, not Lake Benbrook, not Torres. He stood, approaching the glass case. Inside, beside the B-27 envelope, were other old evidence pieces, a silver necklace engraved RM, a lake map, a photo of a broken green bicycle, all neatly arranged like a vow of the profession. No clue is too small, no case truly closed. Torres took a key, opened the case, and placed the envelope back at the center. He brushed a finger along the glass edge, where a new seal was added after the 2020 review. Under the light, the seal glinted with a faint red streak, like a small flame surviving a storm. He sat, opening his personal recorder, a habit from his intern days. His voice filled the quiet room, directed to no one, a final recounting for himself. One hair, one disappearance, 34 years of waiting. A city that seemed to forget, but Fort Worth never forgot, because justice is sometimes not written in verdicts, but in the patience of those who never stop searching. He stopped recording, tucking the device into a drawer. His gaze lingered on Rachel's photo, one last time. For a moment, he thought he saw her smile, not as a victim, but as someone returned. Footsteps echoed from the hallway, night shift staff, the clatter of a coffee machine. Life went on, as if 1985 never was. But for Torres, that year never left the present. It lived in every file, every paper, every detail the world overlooked. He cleared the desk, turned off the lamp. Before leaving, he paused at the door, looking around the darkening room. File racks stacked high, hundreds of names faded by time. But among them all, the B-27 envelope held the most honored place, like a lighthouse in a sea of memory. As the door closed, light from the hallway lamp pierced the glass, reflecting off the red seal on the envelope. It glowed briefly, then faded, like the final breath of a story fully told. The next morning, the Texas sun blazed down on Fort Worth. At Lake Benbrook, children rode bikes on a newly paved dirt path, their laughter ringing through the breeze. A mother watched, her eyes kind and at ease. No one recalled this was once a crime scene. But in Tarrant County's cold storage, a fragile hair lay still, reminding that every loss leaves a trace, if someone is persistent enough to find it. A bronze plaque outside the cold case room bore a new inscription: Fort Worth Protocol, every file matters, every trace counts. Below it, someone had hand-carved, small and nearly invisible, unless viewed closely. For Rachel, as night fell, motion sensor lights in the storage room flickered on, shining directly on the glass case. A beam grazed the B-27 envelope, glinting off the red seal. The hair inside quivered in the air-conditioned breeze, delicate as a thread of memory from a distant time. And in the stillness, Fort Worth seemed to whisper to the night, "Justice may sleep, but it never forgets." In the Fort Worth 1985 story, the most haunting aspect isn't just the crime, but how truth finally rose through people who refused to let go, and details that seemed meaningless. A forgotten B-27 evidence bag in cold storage, a tiny hair on a bicycle, the RM necklace hidden in Harold Given's storage room, a tin box buried under a tree by Lake Benbrook, a 1985 911 tape restored after decades. All remind us in America today that justice and community safety don't rely solely on frontline heroes, but on each person's attitude toward truth and responsibility. We live in a society with technology more powerful than ever: forensic genealogy, national databases, protocols like Fort Worth's. But if Strickland hadn't carefully sealed evidence, if Torres hadn't doggedly reopened an old file, if the community hadn't questioned the perfect neighbor always near the scene, Rachel would remain just a face on an old newspaper. The lesson for American life today: don't dismiss unusual signs around you. Respect and protect processes, from record-keeping to law enforcement, to supporting cold case units. Don't idealize the good person just because they stand at a pulpit or serve in church. Trust science, the power of data, but understand that justice requires human persistence. A hair preserved properly can give a victim their voice after 34 years, and every honest, careful choice we make today could be why a city tomorrow doesn't say, "We forgot." Thank you for joining us on this 34-year journey for justice for Rachel Merritt, where a single hair woke Fort Worth. Please subscribe and follow to not miss other stories, where truth, no matter how long buried, is finally found.